Since Twitter launched Spaces in May, Shali Wangoi, Kome Gitobu, and Kare Mwari have been hosting, coordinating, and planning discussions virtually. Interestingly, they had not met physically.
It's actually a coincidence. We bumped into each other virtually. I think one of the very first Twitter Spaces, we were each individually on it, but we had never interacted with each other. And then I think on the second one, the very early ones, you see a familiar name and like, hey, kumeni wewe, ate you're also here. In the process of the space happening and the interesting conversation was there, I think I DM'd Shirley separately, and then I DM'd Cookie separately, just talking about that space that we were in. And from that conversation just moved outside of that space onto everyday things. Yeah, and that's how I think we got to interact with each other. Then now when you ask Cookie, oh, by the way, do you know there's this other lady called Shirley? She's like, yeah, Shirley, I know Shirley. Coincidentally, we were each talking to each other individually.
Kome, Shirley, and Kare are among the 13.2 million Kenyans who are active social media users, according to the Digital Kenya 2021 report by Hotsuite. Most of these social media users are active in the evenings as they catch up on the happenings of the day. The three are among Kenyans who have been eager not to be left behind as the rest of the world started using the latest avenue for interaction, Twitter Spaces. The organization is called Into Spaces, and most evenings you will find some or all of them moderating a discussion. Hosting the discussion is a full-time job for the three, as they have to plan their content and organize their guests beforehand to have a successful discussion.
Sometimes we get the topics off Twitter where people either DM us and ask us about, they want to discuss various topics. Other times it's the three of us, we're like, I kind of feel like this topic is something that needs to be talked about. So do you guys like the idea that we sit down, agree on the topic? Then once we agree on the topic, we start now thinking about who do you want to hear from? Who are the experts in these areas? Then from when we identify them, we now try and reach them via the Twitter handles. Sometimes it's, calling a favor from somebody who's close to them.
As the COVID pandemic forced the world to go virtual, one of the biggest gains was in the use of audio to deliver content. As at January 2021, 70% of internet users used music and audio apps, with Kenyans using applications such as Google Podcast, Shazam, and Spotify, and podcast gaining popularity, signifying the growth of audio as an entirely new platform. Eunice Kilonzo, the content manager at Safaricom, sees the growth of audio platform as creating more opportunities for content creators to share their craft. However, the production must live up to the expectations of the audience, and the trick is to think like a listener.
Think about it, how you would want to consume that story if you're consuming it on radio. So you'll bring in the background voices, and then don't just have one voice. Always have 2-3 people in that conversation. Other people who are going to add color. Someone who would, when they're talking, they would stutter. It's very natural for someone to stutter. So make it very natural. It doesn't look like it's staged, it's scripted. We know you have your script, but make it as natural as possible. Being able to create an ambience that will be able to move from the ear to the mind to the eyes.
According to Chatterball, a podcast measurement company, there are now more than 200,000 shows produced a year. This consists of digitally native podcasts and on-demand radio programs. As at April this year, there were over 48 million episodes available across different platforms. The numbers continue to grow each day, with the World Association of News Publishers stating that the New York Times registers 3 million listeners each day for its daily news podcast. Twitter Spaces is just the newest kid on the audio block. It was launched a year after Clubhouse, which was launched in May 2020 in the United States, and was a big deal because of its invite-only policy. Spaces has become popular because it is open to everyone with a Twitter account. In Kenya, the numbers have been speaking for it.
There was a Twitter space that had 7,000 people. Which place right now, in terms of COVID, in terms of people working from home, will you put 7,000 people in one place? And I think that's an opportunity for brands, for storytellers. Think about, if you want your content to get to that many people, you have to be talking about stuff that people really care about.
Unlike podcasts, which are recorded and uploaded and can be accessed at the listener's pleasure, Twitter Spaces are live as the platform is yet to roll out a provision where one can record the conversations. So what does it take to hold a captivating conversation that attracts numbers and sparks interest to keep the listeners engaged?
It's planning and planning and planning. not just how you prep your speakers, but how you prep the next question, how, like said, the conversations we have on the back end, we know speaker one is speaking, is answering this question, is about to conclude, we're telling ourselves, okay, now Kare prep, throw question number 2 to speaker number 3, or his guys raise a very good point, follow up with that, so that we're not talking over each other or anything. So the planning is what I believe sets us apart from other spaces.
The growing audio spaces not only presents a growing audience, but opportunities for content creators to earn from their craft. According to Statista, an internet statistics portal, Joe Rogan of the Joe Rogan Experience was the highest podcaster globally, making $50 million a year with over 200 million downloads. My Favorite Murder by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstack earned $15 million, and the popular The Dave Ramsey Show, hosted by Dave Ramsey, earned $10 million. While podcasters have managed to monetize the platforms and content over the years, Twitter Spaces hosts are trying to find ways as Twitter works on a monetizing plan for the spaces.
There are different ways to monetize it. Like the tip jars that Twitter's just introduced, that's number one. You can go to your favorite host or moderator, tip them. There's the service that Twitter's about to roll out soon where you can have paid spaces, where you can like maybe sell tickets, for example, for people to come in. But before we get there are different ways that sometimes brands want to partner with you. They can either offset some of your costs in terms of maybe your data or something like that, buy you devices, or sometimes people can say that they want to sponsor a conversation and they pay you for that.
When you think about monetizing content, you can look at it in different ways. You could either charge to enter. At the moment with Twitter Spaces, you can't yet monetize. However, I know Twitter has been working on getting that monetization platform, so then you can now start paying to host some of these spaces and to attend some of these spaces. But also, if you're a content creator who sets up spaces or hosts clubhouse rooms and you have people talking and discussing, and the people who are observing, they're saying, oh, when Eunice hosts this event, she has, on a minimum, she has 100 people. If a brand is to sponsor a space, they won't be looking for someone who's never done it before. They'll be looking for you who's done it, who's tried it, who has already a kind of a following of sorts. In the long term, you will get other ways of money coming back to you.
Despite the fact that audio platforms such as podcast and Twitter Spaces don't have the mass market reach, they still give brands an opportunity to create and grow their current audiences.
It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, but also knowing that it doesn't get to everyone, then it gives an opportunity for brands and content creators to start thinking, okay, how else can people still engage with my content? People who already know them already have an understanding of who they are, so they're likely to continue engaging with them. So that's an opportunity for them to continue that engagement. But it's also an opportunity for them to bring in new consumers.
Safaricom was among the first companies to take the Twitter Spaces route when it hosted a discussion on content creation after the launch of Base, a video-on-demand platform. The discussion brought together content creators, producers, content buyers, and Safaricom representatives to discuss the monetization of content. Currently, there are 485 million podcast listeners globally. According to Podcast Insights, some of the top listening countries as at last month globally include South Korea at 58%, Spain commanding 40%, Sweden 36%, Australia and USA at 33%. According to the Reuters Digital News Report, 40% of the sample consume podcast, mostly whom are educated and in urban areas. With the abundance of audio platforms, Kenyans will clearly be spoiled for choice. But is there room for all these platforms to survive?
A lot more audio streaming sites are opening up podcasts, where back in the day there were very limited ways to access podcasts, and again the technicalities of recording it, but now that we're able to do it with our phones, I think it's just looking for platforms that we can put these conversations on to reach more people, not necessarily looking to the next app.